Hi everyone, this is Jim. Welcome to this Blitz chess postmortem, a postmortem of my Blitz game number 414. I was white here and kicked off with d4. And well, before I get into this game, I'll mention this is a long game, so we'll go through some parts of it quickly, but I'll save some time to take a look at the endgame, because it did end up in kind of an interesting endgame. So anyway, in the opening, my opponent replied with c6, which I can play the move e4 here and transpose into a Caro-Kann defense, or I can play the second choice here, c4, which I did, keeping it in queen's pawn territory. And now my opponent can go into a Slav defense with d5. That's the top choice. But he plays g6, so we're in a very unusual path already on move 3. But you'll see, actually, we stay kind of in the King's Indian or modern defense territory for quite a while. There's even a point at which we get back to, you see the number of positions this has occurred in is slowly increasing in the database. And I play e4 here. My opponent goes knight f6. And at this point, we've transposed basically into a King's Indian setup with the fianchetto, the knight here, and black can follow up with the characteristic move of the King's Indian, e5, although some King's Indians are also played with c5. Or with this restrained setup with c6. So we're in King's Indian territory here. And it actually, after black castles, you see the number of games has gone up from, it was down to 1 at some point. It's gone up to 37. So this is a position that's been seen before. And e5 right away is pretty standard. My opponent plays bishop g4 first, and then after bishop e3, he takes. Take back. The interesting thing about bishop g4 is it was occupying this square where the knight could jump into. And so because of the bishop occupying that square, it was safe for me to develop my bishop to e3, which is often a good square for this bishop. It defends the d-pawn against this potentially dangerous bishop on g7. So it's a useful square to get your bishop to, and often you have to worry about this knight g4 idea harassing it, but because of the way black played this, I never had to worry about that. So black develops knight bd7, I go queen d2, and now he plays e5. So we finally get the complete King's Indian setup here, and we're out of the opening book. I decide to push on right away, and goes queen c7. So this is an okay position. White has more space. You see the engine rates that pretty highly for white, but it's not like it's so much worse than other King's Indian positions. The chess engine in general doesn't like the King's Indian, so take that with a grain of salt. And in fact, right away here, I play the characteristic move bishop h6, and you'll see the evaluation drops immediately. So let's see if we back up. The way to keep an edge here is to push on with g4. That's an interesting idea. Or, let's see, what's this? Exchanging on c6. It's hopping around a lot. Maybe just developing a rook to d1. That seems like a logical move. g4, I'm not sure about that idea. Although it does sort of a preemptive strike. I mean, black has the liberating move in many King's Indians, playing the pawn to f5. And if you get a pawn on g4 here, sort of permanently prevents that, or it puts a clamp on that anyway. So some interesting ideas from the chess engine. I decided to trade off this bishop. I think it's not particularly a great idea in this position because the dark squared bishop here is more or less blocked in by the pawn structure at this point in time. So maybe that's why it's not such an accurate move here. But in the long run, this can still become a strong piece because black's plan is to eventually liberate that bishop by moving the knight away and pushing a pawn, an f-pawn in the center, and maybe even eliminating this obstacle on e4 and pushing through. So that bishop often plays a role later in the game. So I'm getting rid of it early. So my opponent continues developing. Rook f d8. I trade off the bishop. And go g3. This gives this bishop a retreat square, and I'm thinking of playing the move f4 myself so I can maybe break through in the center here. And it's now about an even position, has been since I did that trade. Okay, knight b6. Let's go forward a few moves. b3, a5. I think these are all pretty logical moves. Dropping back to g2, a4, trying to undermine my queenside pawn structure. I've got these pawns here. He wants to break up that chain. I go king h1 as a preparatory move for playing f4. He exchanges here. And let's back up. So the chess engine didn't like my play there. It didn't like king h1, so it wants me to move the rook off of the a file. Okay. Yeah, leaving the rook on the a file, it allows some exchanges here. And maybe some edge to black here. I was playing this move b4 to try and keep the knight out of the c5 square, and maybe that creates yet another weakness here. So it could be that my pawn structure on the queen side is just getting too weak, and there may be ways for black to take advantage of it. Rook takes a1, rook takes a1, c takes d5 is the line the chess engine is recommending. Okay, he goes knight b6. I think is pretty logical. Taking a look at my recently undefended c4 pawn, and he provokes the trade, takes on d5, and the exchange of rooks. So up until this point, actually, the engine approves of black's plays, equalized, or maybe a little bit better. But queen c4 is actually a mistake. Kind of interesting. So with the queens on, black has a good position, and with the queens off, my pieces start to become active. This bishop, I guess, looks like it's not such a great piece at the moment. Maybe that's what black was thinking here. Trade-off, go into an endgame where I've got a bad bishop. But it has other diagonals it can go to. It can be very active on this diagonal or on this diagonal. So it's not stuck here forever. And I have more space in the center, and I can maneuver this knight around, and my rook gets active very quickly. It's already on the open file, so I can come to this a7 square and put pressure on black's weak queenside pawns. So black has weaknesses on the queen side too. So an interesting position, and just a mistake for black to trade here. And so he provoked the trade. I went for it, and now the advantage switched from being in favor of black to being in favor of white. But it's only a small edge. It's not like this is losing immediately. But I immediately start going after these weak pawns. Let's see, he goes knight g4, go king g1. So my king, I never got in that move f4 because he provoked the queen trade. And now I don't necessarily want to play that. I just want to have a solid structure here on the king side. Let's see. The engine is recommending f5. He went knight d2. Maybe he thought also he's getting some activity with the knights. I mean, it is interesting that my king is kind of sealed in for the moment. But, well, I can play this move f3. I didn't play it here, but I play it in a few moves and push his knight away and give my king a way out. But I started with this rook activation, rook a7. He goes knight f6. And I play f3 here. So now my king has a route into the game. It's very important the king be active in the endgame. And his knight's not coming back to this square. So if we back up, yeah, actually before the move knight f6, he had a better choice here. Rook c8. Yeah, he needs to get active with his pieces. This is a very good plan for the dark side, playing rook c8, trying to get some counterplay here, or rook d7. Still, as the engine looks deeper and deeper, it likes white's position. That's pretty interesting, I think. Okay, so I get an f3, and now I have quite a good shot. I think the problem is that black is just going to lose one of these pawns over here. I should go king f2 immediately, activating that piece. I was going after the pawns with rook b7, so not the most accurate moves, but I thought I saw a way to just win a pawn here, and I was going for it, and I took the pawn here. Actually, that's a blunder. I can pause. This pawn is still under pressure, and there's no easy way for him to defend it. And I need to notice that my f3 pawn is hanging here and play a move like bishop e2. That would be a great move. And this pawn is not going away. So I just moved too quickly here. I grabbed the pawn, and I failed to notice that my f3 pawn was hanging. So that was a mistake. And actually, the advantage switched back to black at that point. One little mistake is all it takes. I thought I was still doing good here, but well, there's a lot of exchanges, and you see that black is picking up as many pawns as I am with correct play here. So it switches from being in white's favor to black's favor once again. And I had basically a winning advantage at that point. If I had just played bishop e2 and defended the f3 pawn, that would have been a pretty straightforward win. Okay, but so now we're back in the range of even, and the game continues for a while. And at some point I get the advantage. Yeah, so right here, he needs to be very careful about this passed pawn. And that's why I was optimistic about this position. He has this great structure here where all these pawns are very solid and difficult to attack, but only one of these pawns is really a passed pawn, and I'm in position to blockade it. So he just has to take care to stop my pawns. That's the big thing that he has to worry about in this position. And so king f6 is the computer's recommended way of dealing with it. Also h5. But I like king f6, getting the king closer to the action here so that when I start pushing these pawns, he has a response. King e5. And I can't immediately go another step. I would probably bring my bishop to a6. Yeah, that's the move. And give up this pawn. And now rook to c7, preparing to advance this. So it looks like it's about even if we had played in that fashion. He went rook d7, and now I get kind of an unstoppable advantage. I start pushing the pawn. He brings his king this way, h6. That's probably another mistake. Rook c7, inching forward, step by step. Rook to d8. He drops back and wants to defend on the 8th rank here. Also, the knight's covering this square, so he can, at worst, he can sacrifice the knight to stop the pawn. But that's probably a losing plan. So b7 and rook b8. So now he's threatening to take it, but I have the bishop that can come over and defend the pawn, and I think there's no way to stop it at this point. So he plays rook d8. Yeah, that's one of the top choices. If he just tries to stand still and move his king, what's my plan for going forward here? Rook to d7. Yeah, I can stay defending the pawn and attacking his knight. And notice that his king is over here on the king side is not in position to come up and defend his knight. If his king were on this square instead, defending the knight, this would be a completely different story. So really I think black's downfall was when he moved his king over here towards this side to support his passed pawns when he really needed to take up a defensive role and think about stopping my passed pawns. Okay, so there's just no way of stopping it. He tries rook d8. That's how the game went. Cancel that. Rook d8. Okay, defending his knight. And so I can just force the pawn through like this, rook c8. And he decides to take at this point, so he sacrifices his knight. But now I'm a piece up in the endgame, and this is not too hard. Let's go forward a few moves. He decides to trade rooks, which for fighting chances, he'd probably be better off keeping the rook on. And then we both get our kings in position here. I should have probably played king d4 here, but I was a little bit afraid of leaving these pawns behind. Or g4. Let's play on a few moves. It's not as simple to win this as it seems. I mean, he's got a pretty good blockade on these on this pawn, which is my passed pawn. These pawns are not going anywhere. I mean, they're not going to score. I guess I can push them forward, but all I can do is inflict pawn damage. So I have to find some way of rounding up his pawns without giving up on my pawn. And it's not so easy, although the chess engine thinks it's just a simple win. So I wait for a little bit, and I make a mistake here. He's giving me the opportunity to trade. I should probably just trade and get down to the situation where it's 2 pawns against 1. I tried to preserve this h-pawn, but I forgot to forgot to think about the fact that this pawn is useless. It's the wrong color rook pawn. So if his king gets back over here in the corner, even if I have a rook pawn and a bishop and get rid of all the other pawns, I still can't win the game. So I should not really be worried about preserving this rook pawn. I should be trading it off. So I should just be taking here. Anyway, the game continues for a few moves. And so that's another example of, I pushed this pawn forward thinking it would be useful to have this as another potential pawn to queen. But that's not the right way to think about it. It's going to be a very difficult pawn to queen. If his king gets in position, I can never win with that pawn. So really, this pawn here is the key pawn that I have to preserve at all costs. Now it turns out this is still winning. I take, he takes, and now we got the situation. If we just ignore these, I've got the situation where he has 2 pawns, and I have 1 pawn, and I just have to figure out how to round up his pawns without losing mine. And eventually come up with a plan. If he keeps going back and forth, what I realized was I can move my king around to this square and force his king back and attack a pawn at the same time. It just requires wasting some time. I'm just moving my king back and forth until his king is not in one of these squares. And if he, so what happens? I get to this ideal position where I'm ready to step into this key square, and then I can waste time with the bishop. So if he moves the king away, again, I'm going to come forward and go after these pawns, all the while holding on to my d-pawn. So eventually he has to push his pawns forward. But now it's easier for my king to blockade. So let's back up and see when this evaluation shift changed. Yeah, starting here. Okay, that's just a repetition. I just thought at some point the engine was evaluating this as like plus 50. And it's interesting. Okay, I take that back. So I'm keeping some edge. Yeah, this is what I was saying. These numbers here, this indicates a win, right? So when do I lose that? Right there. Yeah, when I push that pawn forward. So I really needed to trade there. So at this point, I no longer have that plus 50 score. I just have a score of plus 3, which means there's some edge for white, but the computer doesn't see any particular way to win. And right here with king d6, he thinks it's a draw. I'm not sure I believe that. Let's just try this for a second. Oh, he played that. Okay, that was just a repetition. The chess engine was just having a glitch there. So I get this slight edge all the way through, and right there, when he moves his king forward, he leaves this pawn behind. So let's see, if he plays f2, let's play the best line here, see if I can really win this. If he plays f2 here, I'm going to go after this pawn. He plays e3 to defend it. Yeah, this is the problem. I was worried about this kind of situation. So what this means is that I can maneuver my bishop around this way to guard the queening square, and then I can take this pawn. And if his king ever comes forward, I can queen my d-pawn. But his king doesn't have to come forward. His king can just sit here. And in fact, after I go here, what does he do to waste time? King to d6. Yeah, I go here. He takes the pawn. I take the pawn. And this is just a draw, because the extra my extra pawn here is the rook pawn, and I think he can get back in time to defend it. So let's see, it's black's move. He just goes this way. I take this pawn, have to stop it, and yeah, he just heads for the corner, and that's a draw. So black could have still drawn that at this point. And if we look at the key turning point was way back here when g5 was played. And I tried to just preserve this rook pawn instead of pushing it, instead of trading it off, and that was the key difference. So anyway, hope you got something out of that. So this was an endgame that black could have drawn with best play at this point, and this idea, well, I'm pushing for the win as best I can, but with the idea of pushing on to f2 right at this point, black can hold the draw. Okay, instead black played king f4, and now he's let go of my pawn, and my pawn comes through and wins. I'm in time to stop his pawns from coming forward, because my bishop can control this square, and so if his king comes forward to try and help his pawn's queen, I can bring the bishop back here to chase it away. So anyway, that's how the game ended. My opponent resigned at this point. Pretty long struggle and an interesting endgame. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Leave any comments you have in the section below, and I will see you again soon. Bye.